with a handgun. And I would either pose as security or as a late shopper and take over the store. Then, using the clothing of the employees there, I go and empty the safe and whatever I could carry, and then leave.
7 men walked out of a maximum security Texas prison in broad daylight. No tunnels, no riots, no bloodshed. Just a plan so precise it fooled every guard on duty. 11 days later, on Christmas Eve, a 29-year-old police officer lay dying in a sporting goods parking lot. 11 bullets, a stolen getaway vehicle, and America finally understood what those 7 men were willing to do to stay free. George Rivas engineered the whole thing. He recruited the crew. He designed the escape. And when they needed money to run, he led them straight into an armed robbery that turned into an execution. But here's what nobody saw coming. Rivas and his crew weren't done yet. The FBI launched the biggest manhunt in Texas history. Television networks broadcast their faces coast to coast. And somewhere in the middle of winter, 7 fugitives try to disappear into a country that refused to look away. The John B. Connally Unit sits in Kennedy, Texas, a fortress designed to hold the state's most dangerous offenders. On December 13th, 2000, George Rivas proved that even maximum security walls couldn't contain a man with the right plan. Rivas was serving 17 life sentences for aggravated kidnapping, burglary, and armed robbery. He wasn't eligible for parole until 2046. Most inmates in his position accept the math. Rivas refused. He spent months studying guard rotations, shift changes, and security gaps. He mapped blind spots in the surveillance system. He recruited 6 other inmates, each facing decades behind bars, each desperate enough to risk everything. Together, they became the Texas 7. Their escape required no violence. They impersonated prison officials, forged credentials, and walked past multiple checkpoints without raising suspicion. They stole a maintenance truck and drove through the back gate. By the time staff discovered 11 prison workers bound in an electrical room, the Texas 7 had vanished. Rivas was 30 years old. He had been locked up since he was a teenager. Outside those walls, he had no money, no resources, and no safe place to go. What he did have was 6 other fugitives who believed he could keep them free. For 11 days, they moved across Texas. They stole vehicles. They changed clothes. They avoided cameras and stayed off main roads. But freedom costs money, and on Christmas Eve, Rivas made a decision that would seal all their fates. Officer Aubrey Hawkins was working patrol that night. He had been on the force for 3 years. He was newly married. He responded to a robbery call at Oshman's Sporting Goods in Irving, not knowing the Texas 7 were inside. What happened next turned a prison escape into a capital murder case that would dominate headlines for years. The plan took 4 months to perfect. Rivas studied every shift change at the Connally Unit. He memorized guard schedules, mapped camera blind spots, and identified exactly where surveillance system failed. He wasn't just another inmate killing time. He was building a blueprint for disappearing. He recruited carefully. Michael Rodriguez, serving 99 years for capital murder. Randy Halpern, sentenced to 30 years for injury to a child. Larry Harper, 50 years for aggravated sexual assault. Joseph Garcia, 50 years for murder. Donald Newberry, 99 years for aggravated robbery. Patrick Murphy, 50 years for aggravated sexual assault and burglary. Each man faced decades inside. Each man had something to lose by staying. December 13, 2000, morning shift. The Texas 7 moved. They wore civilian clothes smuggled in over weeks. They carried forged maintenance orders printed on stolen prison letterhead. They spoke with the confidence of men who belonged exactly where they were standing. Guards waved them through 3 separate checkpoints without questioning a single document. When deception works perfectly, nobody thinks to look twice. They reached the maintenance bay. Supervisor, keys, truck. Everything moved according to script. Rivas had rehearsed this mentally 100 times. In reality, matched his planning down to the minute. They loaded tools into the truck bed, cover for anyone watching. They drove toward the back gate. One last checkpoint remained. The guard glanced at their paperwork. Rivas maintained eye contact, gave a nod, said nothing. The gate opened, the truck rolled through, and 7 maximum security inmates drove straight out of prison, while officers stood 10 feet away. But they couldn't leave witnesses who might raise questions too quickly. They circled back through a maintenance entrance, cornered 11 prison employees, and secured them in an electrical room. Duct tape, cable ties, gags. No injuries, no noise. By the time anyone realized something had gone wrong, the Texas 7 were miles away. The truck showed up abandoned 4 hours later near San Antonio. Rivas' crew had already switched vehicles twice. They headed south first, then east, constantly changing direction to confuse any tracking. They had no base, no safe house, no long-term plan beyond staying invisible. For 11 days, they succeeded. They stole cars from shopping center parking lots. They hit gas stations for cash, small amounts that wouldn't trigger alarms. They avoided toll roads and traffic cameras. They slept in shifts and never stayed anywhere longer than night. 6 men followed Rivas' lead without question because his plan had already worked once, and prison felt worse than the risk of getting caught. But money ran out fast. 7 men needed food, fuel, and a place to hide. Desperation breeds mistakes, and Rivas knew they were running out of options. Freedom only lasts as long as the cash in your pocket. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, Rivas made the call. They needed a big score, something that would fund weeks of running. Oshman Sporting Goods and Irving carried cash registers, hunting equipment, and guns. They planned to hit it after closing, when staff was minimal and escape routes were clear. Officer Aubrey Hawkins was working patrol that night. Oshman Sporting Goods closed at 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Employees wanted to get home to their families. Customers cleared out early. By 6:15 p.m., only a handful of staff remained inside, counting registers and locking doors. The Texas 7 entered through a side entrance just after 6 p.m. Before the final lockdown, they spread out across the store, some blocking exits, others herding employees toward the back. Rivas directed movements with hand signals. No shouting, no panic, just control. They demanded cash from the registers. They grabbed merchandise, guns, ammunition, outdoor gear. They moved fast, knowing every minute inside increased the risk of someone calling police. Employees complied. Nobody fought back. Nobody tried to be a hero, but someone had already called. Officer Aubrey Hawkins received a dispatch at 6:32 p.m. robbery in progress at Oshman Sporting Goods, 3333 West Airport Freeway, Irving. He was 3 minutes away. He radioed his position and headed toward the scene without waiting for backup. Hawkins was 29. He'd been with the Irving Police Department since 1997. Before that, he served in the Army. His training taught him to respond, to move toward danger instead of away from it. He pulled into the Oshman's parking lot at 6:35 p.m., scanning for suspects or unusual vehicles. The Texas 7 saw him first. Rivas knew what a police cruiser meant. Backup would arrive within minutes. Their window for escape had just collapsed. They couldn't outrun radios and helicopters, not with 7 men in one vehicle. They had seconds to decide, surrender or eliminate the threat. In that parking lot, 7 men made a choice that turned escape into murder. Hawkins stepped out his patrol car. He was armed, trained, and aware he was walking into an act of robbery. But he didn't know how many suspects he was facing. He didn't know they were fugitives with nothing left to lose. The Texas 7 exited through the back of the store and circled toward the parking lot. Hawkins moved toward the front entrance, trying to establish visual contact. They converged near the side of the building. 11 gunshots. The shooting happened fast. Hawkins fired his weapon, but he was surrounded. Multiple shooters from multiple angles. He went down in the parking lot, hit 11 times at close range. The Texas 7 took his service weapon, his radio, and his car keys. They fled in a stolen vehicle, leaving Hawkins bleeding on the asphalt. A witness across the street called for help at 6:38 p.m. Paramedics arrived within minutes. But Hawkins had already lost too much blood. He was transported to Parkland Hospital in Dallas, where doctors worked for 45 minutes trying to stabilize him. At 7:50 p.m., Aubrey Hawkins was declared dead. He left behind a wife, a family, and a department that would spend the next month hunting the men who killed him. The Irving Police Department issued an immediate alert. FBI joined the case within hours. The Texas Seven were now wanted for capital murder of a peace officer, a crime that carried a guarantee. If caught, they would face execution. 7 faces appeared on wanted posters across the state by midnight. Christmas Day, 2000. While families opened presents and gathered around tables, law enforcement agencies coordinated the largest manhunt in Texas history. Rivas had planned the perfect escape, but he hadn't planned for this. An officer's murder doesn't just trigger an investigation. It triggers a war. And every cop in America wanted to be the one who brought them in. Television networks broadcast their faces every hour. America's Most Wanted dedicated an entire episode to the Texas Seven. Tiplins received thousands of calls, most useless, some promising, a few that changed everything. The FBI assembled a task force. Texas Rangers coordinated with local departments across the Southwest. Roadblocks went up on highways leading out of state. Every stolen vehicle report, every gas station robbery, every suspicious sighting got flagged and investigated. For the Texas Seven, invisibility became impossible. They split into smaller groups. Rivas, Rodriguez, and Halpern stayed together. The others formed a second unit. They figured smaller numbers meant less attention. They were wrong. 7 faces burned into public memory don't become less recognizable when separated. They drove north into Colorado, using stolen plates and back roads. On January 21st, 2001, they checked into a Holiday Inn in Woodland Park, Colorado, using fake names and cash. For 3 days, they stayed inside. They watched television coverage of their own manhunt. They saw their faces on the news every night. They knew the walls were closing in, but exhaustion and desperation kept them in that hotel room longer than logic allowed. Running only works until you stop. On January 22nd, someone recognized them. A guest at the Holiday Inn noticed the group matched descriptions from America's Most Wanted. She called the tip line, gave the exact location, and stayed on the phone while police mobilized. Within hours, Colorado SWAT teams surrounded the hotel. FBI agents set up a perimeter. Helicopters circled overhead. The parking lot became a staging area for what could turn into a firefight involving men who'd already killed a cop. Negotiations began through the hotel room phone. Officers knew the suspect were armed, cornered, and facing execution if captured. But Rivas understood the math now. 7 fugitives versus an entire police department. No escape routes. No backup plan. No winning scenario. At 8:15 p.m. on January 22nd, 2001, Rivas opened the door and walked out with his hands up. Rodriguez and Halpern followed. 3 arrests without a single shot fired. The other 4 members were captured separately over the next 2 days. Harper, knowing he faced execution, shot himself before officers could take him into custody. By January 24th, 2001, the Texas 7 manhunt was over. 6 men sat in custody. 1 was dead. Rivas was extradited back to Texas on January 26. He sat in an interrogation room at the Dallas County Sheriff's Office and said nothing. His attorney advised silence, but silence didn't matter anymore. Witnesses had already identified him. Ballistics would match the stolen guns. Surveillance footage from Oshman's existed. Detectives recovered Officer Hawkins' stolen service weapon from a Colorado hotel room. They collected ammunition that matched rounds fired in the parking lot. They interviewed the employees who'd been held at gunpoint inside Oshman's. Every piece pointed to the same conclusion. George Rivas had led 6 men into a robbery that became a murder. The Irving Police Department held a press conference on January 25th. Chief Lowell Kennedy confirmed all suspects were in custody. He thanked the FBI, the Colorado authorities, and the anonymous witness whose call had ended the manhunt. He mentioned Officer Hawkins' family and promised justice. The escape had lasted 42 days. The consequences would last forever. Dallas County prosecutors filed capital murder charges against all 6 surviving Texas 7 members in February 2001. Murder of a peace officer during robbery. An automatic death penalty case under Texas law. George Rivas faced trial first in October 2001. Officer Hawkins' widow sat front row every day, wanting Rivas to see exactly who Aubrey had left behind. Prosecutors presented surveillance footage from Oshman's sporting goods. Ballistics matched the stolen weapons. Rivas' fingerprints were on stolen merchandise from the Colorado hotel room. The problem? Nobody could say which man fired the fatal shots. 11 bullets from multiple weapons. Texas law covers this through the law parties. If you participate in a crime where someone dies, you're legally responsible. Defense attorneys argued he wanted robbery, not killing. The jury didn't buy it. You don't get to plan the crime and deny responsibility for how it ends. October 9, 2001, guilty. October 11, 2001, death. Rivas showed no reaction. 5 other members received the same sentence. Patrick Murphy got life imprisonment. Execution date: February 29, 2012. February 29, 2012. Leap day. George Rivas will become the 4th Texas 7-member executed. The Huntsville unit houses Texas's execution chamber, a small room with a gurney in the center. Witnesses seated behind glass on both sides. One side for the victim's family, one side for the condemned man's family and attorney. Rivas was moved from death row 3 days before his execution. He met with his attorney, wrote letters to family members he hadn't seen in years. Texas had abolished special last meal requests in 2011. Rivas received what every other inmate at the Walls unit received that evening: barbecue chicken. No elaborate final feast, just standard prison food. Officers noted he remained composed. No outbursts, no breakdowns. Just a man waiting for the end he'd known was coming for over a decade. At 6 p.m., officers escorted Rivas to the execution chamber. He walked without resistance. They secured him to the gurney with leather straps, and 4-line was inserted into each arm. Officer Hawkins' widow sat in the front row. She'd attended every Texas 7 execution. The warden asked if he had any final words. Rivas turned toward the witness window. "First of all, for the Aubrey Hawkins family, I do apologize for everything that happened. Not because I'm here, but for closure in your hearts. I really do believe you deserve that. Words offered too late can never undo the damage already done." At 6:32 p.m., the lethal injection began. At 6:39 p.m., the physician confirmed death. George Rivas was 42 years old. Officer Hawkins' widow released a statement afterward. Rivas' execution didn't bring Aubrey back, but it closed a chapter that had remained open for 12 years.